Welcome to the FML podcast, the podcast on a mission to uncover actionable insights, explore the latest trends, and to catalyze your fintech's growth. Join Growth Gorilla's founder and managing director, Shameer Sachdev, and some of fintech's hardest hitting marketers and leaders.
Welcome everyone to today's episode of the FML podcast. Today we're joined by Shaul Weisband. Shaul, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
I'll start as I always do. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey so far?
I was born in the United States and currently living in Israel, where our company is headquartered. I co-founded together with my co-founders Jifiti about 10 years ago. Beforehand, I was in the marketing and branding space before we started the company. Today, I'm the CMO and oversee our company's marketing, as well as the marketing and sales efforts together with our partners.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Jifiti and what you guys do and what is your proposition?
So we've been around for about 10 years now. Today, what we really do, if you kind of strip it all down, is we enable banks and lenders to compete in the BNPL space, in the buy now, pay later space. And enable them to offer their existing loan programs and deploy them at any point of sale with merchants. We actually started a while ago in the gifting space, which is still a big business of ours, gift cards, gift registry. About 5 years ago, we saw the whole consumer finance, point of sale financing space develop, and we added it as a use case on our platform. It's actually interesting. We were very active in the gift registry space. And if you think about it, it's very similar actually to consumer financing and buy now, pay later, because if you're getting married and you're putting a list together of your gifts, you're walking around the store saying, here's everything that I want, and sending it to grandma and grandpa for them to buy it for you. And it's very similar here. If I'm walking through a store and I see the stuff that I need, I can actually send it to a bank and a lender and allow them to purchase it for me. And I obviously pay my monthly payments back. But then really realizing that as a platform, we brought a solution that was very much needed, a gap in the space when it comes to the connectivity between the banks and the merchants. And that's really what we do today. It's a white labeled solution for banks and lenders that allows them to deploy their loan programs at the point of sale, both online, in-store, anywhere else.
So I suppose the buy now, pay later in the lending space is becoming incredibly popular and competitive. With that in mind, knowing that there are people leading the space and you're enabling the larger institutions, the banks compete, and bearing in mind that you said that banks have been lending for decades now, probably over a century now, how do you think the market will play out over the next few years, the next 3 years, 5 years, maybe even 10 years?
We've seen this space grow tremendously, probably over the past 5 years. The space was really led by the direct-to-consumer fintechs that really came in and created technology to be able to work with the merchants to integrate with their point of sales. But the key aspect there was that those fintechs were actually the lenders as well. So they came in with the technology, also developed the capabilities for financial services, decisioning, be able to decide on approving consumers, and then actually giving the loans themselves. And where Jifiti fits in is really on the other side, on the banks and lenders. If you think about it, banks and lenders have been giving consumer loans, business loans for well over 100 years. That's what they do well. They're first and foremost financial services. Sometimes the gap can be on the technology space. And that's exactly what we do. We are a technology platform, technology facilitator. I always like when I speak to people and pitch, I always start about what we don't do before what we do. And what we don't do is we don't lend. We don't have a balance sheet. We don't take any risks. We are a fully white labeled solution for banks that gives them all the technology tools to take their existing loan programs. In other words, they're continuing to do exactly what they do on a daily basis and do very well, which is giving loans and also servicing those loans. And we're giving them all the tools as a white labeled solution to work with the merchants and offer those loan programs at the point of sale. And that's kind of really where we come in. The market as a whole has been led by these fintechs, and we're enabling the banks to compete with these fintechs and be big players in the buy now, pay later, and embedded lending space.
Knowing that the fintechs are leading the space and you're enabling the larger institutions, the banks, to compete, and bearing in mind that you said that banks have been lending for decades now, probably over a century now. How do you think the market will play out over the next few years, the next 3 years, 5 years, maybe even 10 years?
Really in that direction. That's kind of where we've placed our chips over the past 5 years. And we're actually seeing a tipping point right now. The industry is going to go in that direction. It's going to go in the direction of regulated financial institutions that know how to give loans and that do it very, very well. They're kind of really the ones that'll step in, be able to capture the market on the technology front. And I always mention that the fintechs of the world were born as technology companies and just happen to give financial services. So they have a gap of about 100 years to catch up on when it comes to financial services. The banks, they're financial institutions. They've been doing that for hundreds of years. So they have a smaller gap to close when it comes to technology, probably 2-3 years worth of technology to close. And that's really what we do. And that's kind of where we see the industry going. Number one, on the brand loyalty level, these banks have that brand loyalty. The consumers bank with them on a daily basis. They trust them. They see them. They know, especially when it comes to important financial decisions, when it comes to taking a loan or large purchases, they definitely trust them. And also on the merchant side, I think they see the entities that are not going anywhere. They have very large balance sheets. They can be very, very competitive because they have the cost of capital. And once they are able to close that gap and offer a very similar both user experience and a technology stack as the fintechs, that's really where the market's going to land, is with the larger banks.
What sort of geography are you serving? And I suppose, where are your customers located?
As a technology platform, we are global, right? So we are working with the regulated lenders in each market. Today, we are live across our two main markets, are North America and Europe. We are active also in South Africa and LATAM. But as a platform, it enables us to be really both lender agnostic and market agnostic, because what we do is usually when we go into a new market, we work first and foremost with the lenders, the regulated lenders. They do the single integration to the back end and then can start bringing it to the local merchants. So we're able to, we are today active globally. Obviously, each lender that we work with have their regulatory limitations in terms of where they can lend. And that's also a big value of the platform. If you think about it, for instance, on the merchant side, a global merchant like IKEA, who's a big client of ours, large global footprint, stores in multiple countries, obviously. And in every country, they want to be able to offer embedded lending for their consumers. But on one hand, if I'm walking into a store in Spain, I can't request a loan and get approved for a loan from a lender who is based in France. So instead of doing a separate integration with each lender in each market with their point of sale, we act as that central hub for the global merchants. All the different lenders for each market can connect to our back end. We can offer a seamless user experience, both online, in-store, fully branded for the merchant and the lender. And that way, when the consumer is in one store and they're applying for their financing, we can route it to the correct lender, get the approval in real time, and let them check out. So as a platform, agnostic to both markets, loan programs, and lenders.
I suppose the trends or the outlook that you kind of described, do you think that's relevant for all of the markets that you're present in, or do you think that will only be the case in, say, specific markets?
It really depends on the market. Each market has its own specific traits. There are some markets that people are more heavily banked or underbanked, so the different types of loans. There are ones that are more kind of focused on what we call the split pay, which has kind of become like the BNPL has become the generic name across for all different loan types and loan programs. But for a smaller split pay, where a single a transaction, were usually smaller ticket item, and splitting that pay over 3 or 4 different payments on a single credit card. So that can be more popular in some markets. In other markets, it's more about the longer term installment loans or line of credit. It really depends on the customer, what they're used to on a market level. But that's the nice thing about also as the platform. It's built in a modular way where both the merchant and the lender can offer different financial products based on the local market. So it could be a longer type of loan, a shorter type. It could be a business. It could be consumer. It's really adapted based on the local market.
Talk me through your approach towards acquiring customers. What are the levers? What are the levers that you're pulling to get those customers through the front door?
We're in a B2B space where we're obviously selling to very large banks and very large merchants. And we're selling a robust platform. So first of all, it's about being aware of who you're marketing to and how you're marketing to them. We know that we're not going to put up a campaign and then someone from a bank or a merchant's going to see it and fill out a form and then become a client tomorrow. You're dealing with larger sales cycles across the board. And it's really about what we consider the touch points. where do we have those different touch points with these large entities? It could be either getting in front of them, whether it's online versus conferences, webinars, and so on. And it's setting the stage, really being able to bring value to them at enough different touch points where eventually we will have a conversation with them. And it's also being very familiar with the fact that pretty much 80% of their research is going to be done before they even speak to us. And that's a big focus of ours, whether it's positioning, thought leadership, any value that we can bring to the market to let our prospects or potential customers learn about the industry and then eventually about us. That's really kind of our focus, is that long tail funnel and sales cycle when it comes to acquiring the clients.
Are there any sort of specific tactics or mechanisms or playbooks that you've run or are running that have yielded significant results?
The two main ones I would really say is, first of all, on the content side. I always speak to my team about whoever's doing the research and reading about us. We want to make them the smartest person in the room, right? The scenario we always build out is the CEO or some senior executive in a bank or merchant comes to someone else on the team or even on the level of an intern and says, okay, it's obviously a hot space, embedded lending. We want to be there. We want to be active. Can you do some research? What's the industry? What's going on in the industry? Who the players are? And that's kind of like the mindset that we put out there in terms of making sure that we can give them all the material that they need, not specifically about us, but about the industry first, and then afterwards, obviously about us. But the scenario is give them all the information, let them download, whether it's white papers, whether it's content. And that way, a week later, when that person is coming to give a presentation in their company about the industry and who the players are, make sure that they look really, really smart. From our experience, that part of really being kind of just as a partner to them to learn about what's out there, be kind of very generous in terms of our help to the level of building out business cases and so on. We've seen that to be very effective in our space because eventually they have to make a decision, and a right decision. And if we can help them make that decision, knowing that it's possible down the line that that decision might be build themselves or not with us, but positioning ourselves in a way where we're set up for that RFI, for that decision, I think we've seen a lot of success with that.
You mentioned obviously that you've got a number of clients in Europe and North America. Do you tend to sort of operate a sort of like a hit list of target customers that you're going after? And if so, how do you engineer your content and your thought leadership and kind of all of those assets to then place them in front of that target customer?
We want to be driven by our biz dev teams. Any team that has kind of the front interaction with clients and potential clients, that'll include, we have the local biz dev, whether it's in Europe, United States, our solutions team, partnerships team, the ones that actually speak to potential clients and the clients, we want to be led by them. So we have a very, very close relationship, ongoing work processes with them to understand kind of what they're heading, what they're targeting, types of companies. And a big part of that is also working together with our partners. We always consider them partners as opposed to clients, from the banks to the global merchants and the core banking companies, for instance, like the FISs of the world that we recently announced a partnership with, who are very, very much kind of obviously very involved on the industry and knows what's happening and kind of understand, first of all, the trends. It could be different verticals or different type of loan programs that people are looking for, and then make sure that the biz dev are out there. And then what we do is we'll usually work on a monthly kind of cycle where we understand from them verticals, maybe specific merchants or banks that they're looking to target, and then be there to assist them, whether it's online campaigns that we would be targeting them with very kind of soft about the industry and about Jifiti and what we do. Because we know, like I've mentioned, we're in a market, on a B2B market, where it's all about white glove, about the sales cycles, the biz dev process. So when they do reach out to them and eventually have that conversation, they really have that starting point, being aware about Jifiti, about what we do, the benefits, us in the news and so on. So the tactics are really about understanding kind of who biz dev is targeting, be ahead of the curve a little bit in terms of who they want to target and how, whether it's through messaging and so on, and make sure we're giving them all the support that it's as seamless as possible on the biz dev level, because we know, we're on the top of the funnel and we're just helping them in order to close those deals. And that's kind of really on what we focus on a tactical level.
My take on B2B has kind of always been the relationship between, I suppose, biz dev / sales and marketing. You kind of have to be on the same wavelength. And to the point that you described, providing that supporting function, but then at the same time running ahead a little bit, so you're creating a bit of awareness with the customers or the audience that they're trying to go after. I want to talk a little bit more about sort of mid-funnel stuff. I just want to say on the top of the funnel for the moment, in terms of sort of that thought leadership, what does that look like? Is that just, things like blog content, or is it things like, webinars? Are you doing roundtables? What does that ecosystem look like?
Totally. So to your point, first of all, with the biz dev, you're absolutely right. But I even say it's more so because we want them to lead us. On a marketing level, we can target anyone we want, but we really want to, we can cast the net as large as possible, but we want to be able to understand from them who they're targeting and then customize the message, specifically also around thought leadership as well. Thought leadership is what we build it around is, first of all, kind of knowing who in the company can speak, very kind of be the face of the different functionality, right? The CEO, Yaakov, my co-partner, obviously, when it comes to the bigger picture industry, but we obviously have some phenomenal people on the product level, payments and so on. So really identify within the company who the voice is that can really bring that thought leadership. And then the second part of that is blog. It's funny because blog, you usually say, that's usually going to be the first, but that's a little bit lower in terms of what we do. Prioritization wise, it's really about being able to go out and bring value, whether it's, first of all, like on a PR level, journalists that we have relationships with that are writing about the industry. We want to be able to help them understand. And it's always about, the thought leadership is always about not selling Jifiti and what we do, but it's explaining about the industry. I'll give you an example of probably last year. I was in Madrid. We were at a conference and Yaakov, my business partner, was asked to speak. He didn't even mention Jifiti once. He actually went up there and he spoke only about the industry, how we saw it develop over the past 5-10 years, going from the consumer end and circling back to the business financing and going from the fintechs to the banks and so on. And it, first of all, was fascinating. And that was probably one of the most successful kind of lead generations we've seen because a lot of people shared it, contacted us. And then we see a lot of times also in the industry when people are writing about it, they reach out to us, whether it's understanding a little bit more, getting an opinion, writing a byline, where we've been very successful about that. We have a weekly meeting with the marketing and the biz dev and here around topics of what's going on, just understand what's going on in the market and being able to say, okay, here, let's understand kind of what makes sense in terms of bringing value to the industry and pitch it that way. That's really where we see the thought leadership part come in. And everything else, whether it's through webinars, whether it's through pitching to publications or bylines or blog posts, those are just the channels. It's really about the content and the value that we can bring and make it really high quality.
Your brand positioning is almost like slightly lighthearted. It's you don't come across as a really serious brand. Not that sounds disrespectful.
No, that's not what I want to hear. Yeah.
You don't sound like a stuffy brand. It's probably the best way to put it. It doesn't feel like you're loaded with jargon and you're difficult to understand. I can probably guess as to why you've gone down that path, but I'd be really interested in hearing about the journey and the reasonings behind that decision.
First of all, you're absolutely right. I think that's definitely something that's guided us on the marketing level and our website and so on. I would say we bring personality to our brand and wit and humor. First of all, it really does reflect the team and the culture that we have here on the forefront of when it comes to technology and security. And you can only imagine, doing integrations with banks and so on, the level of technology that we have to have here and the due diligence that we go through. But on the other hand, we're a team that we don't take ourselves that seriously. And we really do realize that it doesn't matter. And I think this is true for anybody, whether you're selling, especially in our space, B2B financial products to banks. At the end of the day, we're selling to human beings, really. And if it's a senior person in the bank or the CTO or an implementation engineer, they really, really do appreciate being spoken to kind of like as a human. And it's not just about like the technology and the benefits, but it's really about everything around it and the language that we use. And that's always guided us. And we've gotten incredible feedback about it. And it really sets us apart. I can give you a quick example that I use. Especially if you look at our team page, we make sure that everyone on the team is there and it's got a great vibe. And I remember once, probably 2-3 years ago now already, that someone that I know mentioned that he had a connection and a very senior person and a senior vice president of a bank that was looking into our space. And he said, is it okay if I reach out and make an intro? And I said, sure. So he wrote to him separately, saying, I'm in touch with the team at Jifiti. Would you like an intro? And he forwarded me his response from the bank. And he's like something like traveling don't have a lot of time, just looked them up, read their team page, and no idea what they do, but that's the kind of team that I want to be working with. And that's exactly kind of where we were going with that. Really being able to know that on a relationship level, on a marketing level, on a messaging level, we're really humans talking to humans. And I think that's appreciated a lot, especially in a space like ours, which you can very easily find a comfortable space talking only about the product and the technology.
It was a similar sort of conversation I had with the CMO at Rapid. And it was all about getting that personality through, kept creating cut through with your brand. I was just, while you were speaking, I was actually looking at the team page, and you can capture everybody's personality and their interest just by looking at the page immediately. The thing that always stands out on our site is our cookie banner when it pops up. The box.
I noticed that. The whatever button, right?
Yeah, the whatever button, yeah.
I noticed that, and I sent it to someone. Loved it. Absolutely.
Yeah, that was me just reaching the point. I think cookie banners kind of came out like when I did that. I was like, yeah, whatever. Does anyone click it? Who cares?
It's like I was on a site also that, you just click and then it wrote something, at least scroll down to pretend you read it, right? Same exact thing. Love that.
I think little things like that, like
100%.
I used to work for a trading platform, and if you put in like a ridiculously big number, like I think like the exposure amount, it would just default to a lot, and then that would be it. Because it just knows not a reasonable amount that someone's going to trade, right? Although we never tried it, so. And so kind of moving like a little bit sort of further into the funnel. So obviously the market over the last year or so, everyone has become a lot more price sensitive, and decisions are definitely taking longer to be made. How were you tackling that before? What's changed and how are you tackling that now?
First of all, you're absolutely right. It's an interesting paradox in our space, actually, because with everything that's going on in the market, there's more of a need for our product, right? People today do need fair and responsible financial products for them to be able to make larger purchases. But on the other hand, the entities that we work, whether it's the banks or the merchants, are taking it a lot slower, right? They're sitting a little bit on the sideline, kind of understanding what's happening with the market, where they should be investing, and so on. And a big aspect of that, I think, is around the partnerships. We're a white labeled solution. We're not a consumer-facing brand. You'll never see Jifiti anywhere when you're using us, and the hundreds of thousands of consumers that are using us daily will never see us as a brand. They interact with the merchant and the lender. But I always like to say that being a white labeled solution brings a lot of responsibility as well, because we are the technology behind our partner banks, and we're pretty much their face, to making sure that things work smoothly, that we can bring that functionality. That's what we set from the beginning, really, when we work with our partners, in a way that it's a win-win situation. Our business model works around that as well. We're built in a way as a white label solution for banks and lenders to be able to take our platform and then start selling it to merchants and creating a loan volume. And our business model is built around that. Their success is our success, and that's really where we put our focus. So on one hand, you have the incredible demand coming from the market, right? BNPL, with everything that the fintechs have done, has been tremendous. They really have. They've created a market. I say that today it's become a payment method, right? You'll see credit card, you'll see PayPal, and you'll see BNPL because it's something that people expect. And even with the kind of decline of whether it's the fintechs valuations and so on, the demand from the consumers and the merchants has only gone up. That's the combination of the two. The banks and lenders see the demand. They know they have to be there. They know that they have to, in order to be a relevant and modern lender, they have to be at that point of sale. But when you combine that with a true partnership as a white labeled solution that we work with them, and it's really, we're not talking about we don't make our money on upfront cost and setup and stuff like that. We're based on a win-win situation. So when you combine that with the demand, that we've really seen a kind of success around that for the go-to-market with both the merchants and the lenders.
Looking at your conversion piece, let's call it, can you kind of talk me through sort of how you tend to sort of nurture these incoming leads that are being brought in by your biz dev team?
Marketing is top of the funnel, and then we see whether it's creating the leads or creating the atmosphere where someone wants to reach out to us. I always mention kind of on a marketing level, our job is two sides of the same coin. Number one, being able to position ourselves, thought leadership, someone that someone wants to work with. And on the other side of that same coin is, okay, how do we use that positioning in order to create those leads and get people to want to speak to us? And on a handover level, kind of on the way we see it as the top of the funnel, we create those leads. And once we are able to qualify those leads and hand it over to biz dev in the relevant geography, that's pretty much where on the top of the funnel, that's where our job ends. That's where kind of we ring the bell. We see the success. But on the other hand, seeing them through, since we know that we're talking about longer sales cycle, working with the biz dev in order to nurture those leads. So it could be on a thought leadership space, of course, on newsletter, making sure that they hear from us what's new, and then anything that we can do to bring to value to them, that they're always hearing from us, that they know things are happening as they go through those sales cycle, is what our job is. And working closely with the biz dev, knowing what stage they're at with each account, and being able to adapt also the touch points and also the messaging for that's relevant for the level that they are in our sales cycle.
There's a couple of bits I kind of want to touch on there. One is, you said obviously keeping track of where users are in the funnel. I think just at a higher level, how do you manage the attribution piece around fundamentally demand generation? It's always a bit of a grey area. I mean, we get a lot of inquiries from B2B organizations, and I'll have a tendency to overqualify them versus, say a B2C inquiry, because I want to make sure they've got infrastructure in place to produce content. I want to make sure that they've got a good understanding of, what paid channels can do for them in a B2B world versus, what it would do in a B2C world. And then also then qualify, how do they feel about that grey area? How is that something that you manage internally?
Well, first of all, the person who solves the attribution problem for marketing is going to be a very, very successful person. We'll put it that way. It's definitely an issue. We do it pretty much on two levels. Number one, obviously on a CRM level. We want to be able to make sure that every lead has a what we call a lead source assigned to it, and that we know that at the end of the day, we can look and kind of understand where it came from. It could be from a conference, which has its own challenges, right? We have people running around, standing at the booth, meeting people. Just recently, we found out that one of our biggest accounts from 18 months ago started from a conference back then. We had no idea. And that kind of dirties the data at the end of the day, right? Because you're looking on a marketing level, what's the ROI for each one? Which initiative brings kind of the best success? And you want to be able to attribute each one. So we do the best that we can in order to create the processes on a CRM level, making sure every lead that we know is doing it through there, and we know where it came from. There's not much more in terms of that you can really, really do beyond managing those leads, speaking to them, finding out kind of where they're coming from. But what we can do also when it comes to, you mentioned the issue of a lead coming in and understanding whether they're qualified and it makes sense to even speak to them. We've had some really good success actually with the even on the contact form level, getting more information from the lead when they come in. So we want to really know what kind of partner they are, whether it's a merchant or a lender, if they're in the space already, if they're a merchant, their AOV, their sales, general numbers, right? We always say, don't run and get your accountant. We don't want anything that we have to sign NDAs on. But collecting that initial information at the first point saves a lot of time on both ends, because I think the leads that come in really do appreciate the fact that you come back and say, listen, it just doesn't seem like it's a good fit at this point. Or going into that initial discovery call, knowing exactly, having that information and what we're focusing on and whether it really makes sense, or even who in the team it should be going to. So we've seen a lot of success in gathering that initial information at the first touch point. But beyond that, it's really just being able to manage every source and knowing where it came from and following it on a weekly basis.
It's interesting you say, gathering more information up front on the contact form. That's something else that ends up being a point of conversation. And I tend to find that the more early stage businesses will veer away from that because they're scared about losing a lead, because, all of a sudden a lead will be, a high value lead may not want to fill out a form. But actually what I found is that the opposite is true. Obviously anything is up to a degree, but actually asking more questions and then taking them through not just a contact form, but a bit of a sign-up journey and getting them to part with information. We even do it on our site, and we'll I think it's 3 or 4 steps, and then we'll actually then ask them to provide us further information as to why they reached out to us and why they contacted us. Actually ends up yielding in then people actually following up with that initial call and then sticking with us through the process from end to end, and that's improved conversion rate, drastically for us.
100%. It's also all about, what we explain there. We explain that this information is going to be helpful for us, so we can point you in the right direction. At the end of the day, that's what we want to do. We have different kind of functionality and different teams. So any further information they can share with us will just be helpful for both ends. And I think people appreciate that.
Absolutely. Before we end, really, I just want to talk a little bit about tailoring messaging. And you mentioned this a couple of times throughout today's conversation. You mentioned it at the top of the funnel. You mentioned it when you're talking about supporting your biz dev team. I'd like to learn more about that and your process around how you build tailor-made messages and content for your audience.
So we kind of internally call it what we call the double click method, right? At every stage you're somewhere and then you want to double click and learn more about that and then more and further and take a deeper dive. That at some point also internally you have to decide where that cutoff is between, for instance, marketing and product marketing or product when they want to learn. When we look at the funnel, we see kind of like intent on a business level. In other words, that means we consider an account someone who's interested in our industry but doesn't know about Jifiti. So in that case, we're saying, okay, let's teach them, let's create awareness in very, very high level about Jifiti and how we're different. We touched about kind of like the brand and the personality. What a great example is just Money 2020 last year in Las Vegas. We were putting a booth together and we wanted to put something. And how we really differentiate between the direct consumer fintechs who actually give the loans as opposed to us who are a technology facilitator for the banks. At the end of the day, if you think about it, is like I mentioned, that we're not giving the loans. The bank is the one that has the balance sheet. And what we did was we took the backdrop of our booth, and all it said in big was that we have no money. That's it. And then once you come closer, and then they suddenly saw in smaller, but the banks do, right? And then that's kind of what we consider the highest level of like, okay, how do we get a hook? How do we get something that people will talk about and say, okay, there's something different here. So that's kind of like building out the messaging on someone who knows about the industry, doesn't know about Jifiti. And then the next level is, okay, we see intent on a Jifiti level. In other words, they've been on our website, they've downloaded white papers, they know about us, they might have reached out. Okay, so then that there's intent on a company level also. Then now we start going a little bit more in terms of the functionality, but tailored to who they are. It could be a bank, it could be a merchant, it might be a kind of a financial services company who also sell to banks. So tailoring the messaging about what we can bring to them specifically that benefits, and then following them down kind of the sales funnel, right? And we usually see it also once it's handed off, for instance, to the product team or the implementation team. So creating all the material where you're double clicking in on certain functionality, on the checkout capabilities and closing the transaction, the different methodologies that we have for that. So how do we customize around that and understanding, okay, this is a merchant who's in our funnel and they are active online versus on store. So what are the solutions that we have for online, or if they're in store, what are the solutions we have in store? So really customizing it both on the use case, but also at what level they are in terms of the funnel, because they're always double clicking. And we want to always have more of a resolution based on where they are, that they have more understanding about the product, and then eventually say, yes, this is a solution we need. So that's really kind of how we focus in terms of how we customize the messaging based on who it is and what stage they're at with us.
Again, I mean, we're an agency, and I think there's so many similarities there, because obviously we're B2B as well. We produce like FAQs for the accounts team on how we're going to invoice them, and we've got a deck that I send to founders versus a deck that I send to marketers. And I think those little nuances help massively. I think they're incremental gains that you get, but once you start to stack them up, it can be the difference between winning a piece of business and not really. What's the outlook for yourself, and what's the outlook for Jifiti?
For myself, obviously, I'm a lifer here. We're part of the team. We're not going anywhere, and continue to lead the team on the marketing level as we grow. For Jifiti, it's really continuing being that one endpoint for both merchants to access any type of loan program. But behind the curtain, really expand that. We've seen it go from split payments to larger payments to larger installment or line of credits, from consumer to business, from in-store, online to in-store to any other touch point, whether it's in the house and so on. So behind the scenes, really expanding what we're offering, but still continue to be that one single touch point that any merchant or any lender needs to access any of that, and make it very, very easy for them to implement embedded lending, but to continue building on the functionality and our offering.
Before we wrap up, let's jump into the quick fire round.
Let's do it.
What podcasts are you listening to today? Or
Podcasts.
Yeah.
anything Guy Raz, obviously. So How I Built This, huge fan, and a couple other of his podcasts. Big fan of Pivot, just on the industry with Kara Swisher, obviously, and Scott. I don't know if it's a podcast, but I've really gotten into Sam Harris's Waking Up. Have you gotten into both the book and the app? It's really about mindfulness, and I've tried to get into it a couple times, and he really got me into it. So I've really been enjoying that.
Cool. I was going to ask, what are you currently reading, or what would you recommend? Would you also recommend Sam Harris's book?
Truth is, I haven't read his book. I'm listening to his online sessions. Book I'm reading now, 4,000 Weeks. You read 4,000 Weeks?
I haven't, no.
By Oliver Bookerman, I believe. Puts things into perspective there in terms of how you spend your time. I'm really enjoying it.
Other than Jifiti, what's your favorite fintech company or brand or app?
Any of the fintechs there that are really changing the game, I think, when it comes to payments. I really do enjoy kind of following them, also on the payment level, but also on really much on their marketing level and how they're bringing their solutions to market. No one specific, it's really industry across the board.
What's the best bit of life advice you've ever received?
To surround yourself with people who act as guardrails. I like that.
And what's one thing that I haven't asked you that I perhaps should have?
One thing I always enjoy asking when I interview people is what they enjoy doing outside of work, because I think it tells me a lot about that person. Just the hobbies of, obviously, beyond being a family person, it's cooking. I was, if I wasn't in the fintech world, I'd probably be going to culinary school, and maybe that's still an option one day. But that's what I enjoy doing in the kitchen. It's my therapy.
What's your sort of signature dish or go-to cuisine?
Anything the kids will eat, really. Simple stuff. Just really, I don't go too crazy. Just really simple stuff that people can enjoy. Its flavor, and I just enjoy having people around in the kitchen and cooking for them.
Cool. I'm the cook in my house as well. So anything on a barbecue is usually my go-to response.
There you go.
Yeah. Shaul, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today.
Same here. Thank you so much.
The FML podcast is brought to you by Growth Gorilla. To find out how our marketing growth experts can boost your fintech's growth, head to growthgorilla.co.uk. And make sure to search for the FML podcast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Don't forget to click follow to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Growth Gorilla, thanks for listening.